Welcome to part 5. Now it is time to discuss aspects. Now, you'll notice there are several colored lines in the middle of this chart. These are aspects. The aspects will be between two planets or 2 points or a point in a planet. Now there are many types of aspects, but the ones we are going to cover, because they're the most influential, is a square, an opposition, a trine, and a conjunction. So to start with, a square. If you see a square, that's the symbol for a square. A square is when the two planets or points are 90 degrees apart. So if we look here, let's say Saturn is 15 degrees Aquarius, and let's say Jupiter is 15 degrees Taurus. That's 90 degrees apart. That's a square. A square is basically going to be a point of tension and conflict. Or it's going to cause lots of tension, lots of conflict, and the two planets will not be working very well together. Now, an opposition is 180 degrees apart. So Jupiter and Pluto. So an opposition, for example, would it will be tension and conflict, but an opposition, unlike the square, is going to be more like a tug of war between the two planets. And from my experience, an opposition is a little bit easier to identify than a square would be, because the opposition is more like a tug of war. Next, we have a trine. And a trine is 120 degrees apart. A trine it means that the two planets are going, or objects or points are going to be working well together. In this case, the moon is trining the sun, and it's trining Venus. Now let's say the moon is 25 degrees Gemini, let's say the sun is 25 degrees Libra. That's 120 degrees apart, that's a trine. But something else you'll notice with trines, they're always in the same element. Gemini is air, Libra is air. So sun in Libra, moon in Gemini, those are both air signs, and we have a trine. Now Venus, let's say Venus is 24 degrees Libra. So instead of being a full 120 degrees for a full trine, it would be 119 degrees. Well, that's close enough that it's still considered a trine. It don't have to be right at 120 degrees, and it's the same with any aspect, as long as it's close to it. And next is a conjunction. And you can barely see it right here, but there's a little line I drew in between the sun, in between the point indicating the sun and the point indicating Venus. A conjunction is technically 0 degrees, meaning they're right on top of each other, but also close by will be a conjunction as well. In this case, if we say 24 degrees Libra and 25 degrees Libra, then that's a conjunction. And the conjunction will cause a very powerful effect, a very powerful point in the chart. It can be good or bad. Trines are good, squares and oppositions are bad. So, to give an example, let's look at the moon opposing a retrograde Mars. Let's say the moon is 25 degrees Gemini and the Mars is 25 degrees Sagittarius. They're opposing. The emotion and intuition of the moon, which having a mutable air Gemini nature and being prominent in the area of life of lower learning and short distance travels, that is going to be opposing and conflicting and having a tug of war with the action, the courage, the drive, the energy of Mars, which has the mutable fire Sagittarius nature and operating in or prominent in the ninth house of higher learning and long distance travels. And it's unstable anyway because it's in retrograde. So it's not going to be as stable because of the retrograde. And they're opposing. So that is an example of how to look at that. So there's an issue between their inner self and their actions, or the way they act in those areas of life with the energies of those signs. On the other hand, the moon is working well with the sun and Venus in the 7th house of others and partnerships with the cardinal air energy of Libra. So that's all working great together. These and the moon are working well together because of the trine, or the two trines. South node, north node, basically they are always 180 degrees apart. They are always opposing. I just didn't put it on there. And the next thing we need to cover is Chiron. Chiron is an asteroid. There are many asteroids that can be used in astrology, and also many virtual points. But we're only going to cover Chiron. So, Chiron is known as the wounded healer. In this case, it's in the 4th house of home and family life. So, that could be interpreted as this person has some type of a wound. It could be not a literal wound, but some type of mental or emotional wound involving the home or the family life. And because of that wound, they are better able to help others overcome their own issues that involve the home or family life. That's one way that that could be looked at, by having Chiron there. So that is all I'm going to do on this board. And now it is time to go to the test chart that I showed in the introduction, and we are going to go through it. Okay, since we were just talking about aspects, you'll probably notice that the aspects are something that really jumps out in a chart. Something that's really noticeable. You can see the signs. You can see the houses, planets, the degrees that are being shown next to each planet and point. And the ascendant, descendant, MC, IC, they have the degrees next to them. Now, with the aspects, you can go down to this chart over here and remember the symbols I showed. We have Sun conjuncting Mercury, Sun conjuncting Mercury, Sun trining Saturn, Sun trining Saturn, Sun trining the ascendant, Sun trining the ascendant. We have Moon opposing Saturn, Moon opposing Saturn, Moon squaring Uranus, Moon squaring Uranus, Moon opposing ascendant, Moon opposing ascendant. So that's another way. So there's two ways you can actually look at the aspects here. And since you have the degrees, you'll also know whether it's exactly on the 180 or the 90 or the 120 or the 0, and you'll also, or if it's just nearby. So that you'll be able to determine how powerful the aspect will be. You can also go over here to the planets over and points over here, and it will show you the sign they're in and give you the degrees here as well. It gives you the ascendant and MC, its degrees, the ascendant and the MC. Gives you the second house and third house cusps. Second house and its cusp right here in Gemini, 8 degrees Gemini. Now directly opposing that, they don't give you the 8th house cusp. Why? Because it's simply the same degrees as the second house cusp, only in the opposite sign. In this case, the 8th house cusp is Sagittarius, and since the second house cusp is at 8 degrees Gemini, the 8th house cusp is going to be 8 degrees Sagittarius. Third house cusp in Cancer, 0 degrees Cancer. So third house cusp, 0 degrees Cancer. Well, opposite of that is the 9th house cusp, and that's going to be 0 degrees Capricorn. So they didn't give you that, but that's easy to just look straight across from it, and you'll know what it is. And same with the other house cusps. We have cardinal, fixed, immutable, fire, earth, air, water, and it tells you what sign the planets are in based on the elements and the cardinal fixed mutable. Also gives you the birth time of 12:45 p.m. Now, that is really important to know the birth time. Without the birth time, you can't get you don't know what your houses are, you don't know what your ascendant is, and I've went over how important the ascendant is when I went over the sun, the moon, and the ascendant being more or less your big three. And since you don't know the ascendant, the house placements, or any of that, then your chart is going to be very incomplete. Now, that's without your birth time. Now, even if you get your birth time and it's off a little bit, let's say it's off by an hour, then Aries is going to be down here and a little down here quite a bit instead of Taurus, and your ascendant might end up being right through here. 2 hours off, let's say instead of 11, let's say that's 10:45 p.m. instead of 12. Then your ascendant is going to be right through here. Or this, rather, is going to be down here, basically. Aries is going to be down here. And that just, in 2 hours, just changed one of your big three parts of your chart. And 2 hours will also, it would kick your sun over, assuming the houses stay the same lineup. It would kick your sun over into the 10th house, kick Venus over into the 8th house. 2 hours, just 2 hours, made a very, very big difference on the makeup of someone's chart. And possibly even made the moon move a couple degrees within Scorpio. Because the moon changes signs every 2 to 2.5 days. It's the fastest moving of all the planets. So here's the North Node. This says true node, but to keep this simple, we will just say the true node in simple terms is the North Node. The South Node is not on here because they figure, I suppose, that it's not necessary to put it on there because the North Node and South Node are always 180 degrees apart. So if the North Node is at 3 degrees Leo, well, the South Node's at 3 degrees Aquarius. And since the North Node's in the 4th house, South Node's in the 10th house. So that's pretty much. There's also some other aspects here which I didn't go over because they're not as much, they don't have as much of an impact as the 4 that I showed. There's also, this chart don't have all the other asteroids and virtual points on it, but you can get a chart that does. And I will do a little bit of interpreting here for you. Okay, so let's start with some obvious things, or what you could consider to be obvious. Sun is in Capricorn. It even tells you that right here. Ascendant in Taurus. Moon in Scorpio. The sun is also in the 9th house. Moon in the 7th house. And the ascendant is the 1st house cusp. That's how it always is. So we have the cardinal earth energy of Capricorn, that initiating, enthusiastic type of practical and realistic energy that is going to be how the sun, how the ego and core self, that's the type of energy it's going to have, that Capricorn energy. And it's going to be very quite it's going to be quite prominent. A lot of activity with that sun in Capricorn energy. A lot of activity with it in the 9th house of higher learning and long distance travels. Now the moon is in Scorpio, so it's going to be emotional, intuitive. And the moon, is actually going to be emotional and intuitive. So Scorpio is going to be fixed, emotion and intuition. So resistant to change. So that is how the person's emotions and intuition is going to work. It's going to have a emotional and intuitive but resistant to change type of energy. And it's going to be prominent in the way that they perceive others and in their partnerships and basically the house of others and partnerships. 7th house. Now we can go to over here and see there's an opposition. Moon and Saturn. Moon and Saturn. Opposition. That is going to mean there's going to be a tug of war between their emotions, their intuition, their inner self, and the way their mastery and their limitations and their restrictive nature in the earthly Taurus, and in the 1st house of the way they perceive others and the self-image. There's going to be a tug of war there. So that could mean there could be some type of conflict or tug of war between their emotions connected to others and their restrictiveness connected to their outer image. For instance, the whole chart has to be taken into account, of course. You can't just go off of one part of it and say that's how it's going to be. The whole chart has to be taken into account. And the sun and the moon, that looks like it's a sextile, 60 degrees apart. But I didn't cover that because it's not as powerful as the aspects that I covered. So we also have, let's see here. We have Mercury and the Sun conjuncting. It's not a strong conjunction. It's 8 degrees apart. But their communication and their intellect is going to be in the same house of higher learning and long distance travels as the Sun. going to have the Capricorn energy with a mix of Sagittarius because it's so close to the cusp. Mercury is so close to the cusp between the two signs. And it's going to create a powerful point because the Sun and Mercury are conjuncting. And Mercury is also trining with Saturn. So the Sun and Mercury are going to get along well with Saturn. So this person may have their self-image, their way others first perceive them, that may work well with their higher learning and long distance travels, but not with their partnerships and different relationships they have. For instance, now the nodes, I see the lunar nodes. Well, the one lunar node, the other one's up here too. So the North Node in Leo, South Node in Aquarius. South Node is in the house of career. North Node in the house of family. So perhaps they're too comfortable in their career. They need to concentrate more on their family life. Not so much the career. They need to get their energy out of the career and into the home, into the family. So anyway, astrology can definitely be used to help people, to help yourself. And to make your life better, to tell you or to show you why you are the way you are. And I just gave you basic, brief descriptions, and that's not really enough to give you a full, accurate chart reading, but it is enough to teach you how it works. So I would suggest, for those of you that are just beginning, I would suggest to learn the signs, learn the planets and important virtual points, and learn the houses, and also to learn, memorize everything else I mentioned, and know that there is more. But I just gave you the basic framework of what you need to know how to read your natal chart, to know what the stuff on there means. So and again, before I forget, I just want to make sure that it's obvious that this is the Placidus system. We have the MC and IC that can go either way in the Placidus system based on the information you enter. It moves, but the AC and DC never move. So you can end up with big houses, small houses. That's the Placidus house system, the Placidus house system. That's the most popular, one of the most popular, and it's the one I use. And if you're not sure which one to use, I would suggest using Placidus to start out with. There are several other house systems. So if you're not sure, just use Placidus to start out with. So that pretty much is that's all I'm going to cover in this video. And before I forget, some of you may be wondering what this means at the top of the chart. That is Greek for astrology. So in English we say astrology. In Greek it is astrologia. So thanks for watching.